Trucker Dump, episode 185. Well, you asked and I listened. In today's show, we go back to a time where there was nothing on the show but this dorky trucker telling a story and reading a couple of emails from listeners. This time around, we've got a rant called Scoot Over and Fix It Now. We'll also hear a bathroom story from driver Dave, and one of a kind sent in an audio clip about harassment and urban parking. It's about time, girl. So, let's get on with it.
Welcome to Trucker Dump, where you'll get one driver's insights and sometimes humorous views of truck driving and the trucking industry, and pretty much anything else he feels like dumping on you. This podcast is brought to you by AboutTruckDriving.com, resources to help you understand the world of truck driving through the use of stories and a pathetic attempt at humor.
Man, I don't know about you, but my toes are frozen right now. Now, normally you'd expect me, after saying something like that, to say I'd been out doing dock work or been out fixing something on my truck in the cold weather. But no, I just turned off the heater in the hotel room to get better audio quality. In reality, it's probably just letting you hear the crazy loud hum of the refrigerator and, well, possibly the highway traffic behind me too. But hey, I'm used to sacrificing for it all. It's okay. I'm used to hardship. Hey, imagine that. I'm starting off a new year by whining about audio issues that not even one of you care about. Welcome to the entirety of the Trucker Dump podcast. Well, I guess I should introduce myself to those of you new to the podcast. My name is Todd McCann. I'm a 25. Yeah, good God. Losing my mind here. 25 years I've been driving a truck. All of it dry van. 22 years of it over the road, last 3.5 or so, almost 4 now, would be as an LTL driver. Did about 9-10 years co-driving with the evil overlord, who is my wife and co-driver. There's some stories about that in some of the older podcasts. If you've never checked out episode 100, go back and check that one out. It explains why the evil overlord is evil. Yeah, that was a good one. So anyway, what else? Well, I'm obviously a podcaster, and I am also an author. I've written 2 trucking ebooks. One is called How to Find a Great Truck Driving Job, and the other is called Trucking Life. Trucking Life includes a 9.25-hour audiobook, and you can get both of those for 50% off right now. That's just through the website, abouttruckdriving.com. That's the only place you can get that deal. So, $9.99 for 2 books, and like I said, the audiobook included. Or if you just want one of those, you can always go to Amazon or Apple iBooks or wherever you get your ebooks and just order it right there. I'm not sure how long this 50% off deal will be going on. I'm guessing through the end of January, but let's just assume it's tomorrow. How about that? All right. Well, welcome to 2023. May this year be far less crappy than it was last year, right? Although, strangely enough, I made more money this year than I ever have in my trucking career, and it wasn't even close. So I don't really know what I'm complaining about, except for it was still a crappy year. And like I said, I got changes coming with the company that's still going to go on in 2023. So not sure how that's all going to pan out. So anyway, just wasn't a great year, but let's hope for better things this year, right? So how was your Christmas? Mine was, I don't know. It was just kind of hard to get in the spirit this year. I don't really know why, but it just was. Usually the evil overlord is the driver behind all of that. She's the one that's all gung-ho for the holidays. We're listening to holiday music. She's got the house all decorated up and everything, and she's really into it. And this year she's just kind of like, bleh. So, I took my cue from her. I never really get that excited about it really, but hey, if she isn't into it, I'm certainly not going to be that into it. Best thing about it, of course, was the remembering of our Lord and Savior. But other than that, I could do without it. But now New Year's, hey, New Year's, you're not stopping this party animal. I mean, I know how to party. So my New Year's Eve was exciting, right? Well, it was, if you consider helping your 81-year-old mother-in-law with her hip replacement physical therapy. Ooh, am I a party animal or what? I did have a scare right at midnight, though. Here I am cruising along. I'm on my way home in the truck. I'm just kind of in a zone world. Just kind of wasn't listening to anything. Just almost home, getting close, just cruising along in the darkness. And all of a sudden, boom! I was like, what the heck? And I looked over to my left and somebody had put off a big firework, one of those big boomers, and looked down at the clock. And of course it was right at midnight. So, well, thanks for the scare, but hey, woke me up for the rest of the trip home. Anyway, I hope you had a great holiday. I hope it was, well, better than mine. Although you can see that wasn't really hard to achieve. Honestly, we're just thinking about just leaving town next holiday. We're considering it. We'll see how that goes. Just getting out, just going, not being anywhere around here. We will see how that works out. So anyway, did you notice something about the intro of this podcast? Where I say Trucker Dump episode 185. Yeah, that part. Right at the end, I usually announce a sponsor, but I did not this time around. And that is because I have no sponsors at this point. I'm just going to come out and give you some behind the scenes stuff. If you don't care about anything about this with podcasting, just skip right over it. No harm, no foul. But anyway, advertisers. It's tricky. Porter Freight Funding was my most recent advertiser. Of course, Volvo has been a longtime sponsor. I've had insurance companies. We did that personal device, kind of like I've fallen and I can't get up device for a while. All of these were great companies, but other than the fall and can't get up device, they were all pretty much aimed at owner operators. I mean, what are the chances you are going to be buying a Volvo anytime soon? Or what's the chance that you're going to need Porter Freight Funding's excellent factoring service if you don't own your own truck? Or even when I had insurance companies on here, if you don't own a truck, you don't need truck insurance. So I just kind of had to rethink this whole thing. And so we've cut ties with everybody. Well, Volvo is just on a break. They may come back. And honestly, their thing is just a little bit different. Now, I mention this because the whole key to advertising is to focus on the people who you're advertising to. Make sure it's something they can relate to, something they need. And, well, some of our past sponsors just weren't that. And I was not bright enough to figure that out. And so a lot of those sponsorships just didn't work. Now, they would work, of course, like Volvo. They just pay per episode. It's more of a brand awareness thing. Just keep their name out there, in the trucking industry. And I'm fine with that. And hopefully they will be back after the economy kind of settles down a little bit. They've kind of taken a break for now. But, Porter Freight Funding, great company. Just like I said, not a lot of use for, if you're not an owner operator. And honestly, most of my listeners, you are company drivers. I do have some owner operators out there, but well, it just wasn't interesting to either party, I guess, because it wasn't a very successful. Like I said, Porter is a great company. They were great to work with. All the past companies that I only choose good companies. I do some research on them. I see if they've got a good reputation. If they do, then I will let them advertise on the show, and I'm happy to have them. But if it's not working for either party, it's not working. So we're just going to try something new in 2023. I'm going to try to focus more on things that you will be interested in. For instance, I have an opportunity to get an affiliate link for Blue Parrot headsets. And, lots of truckers love their Blue Parrot headsets. So I may go with something like that. These won't be official sponsorships. Honestly, a lot of these ones in the past weren't official sponsorships either. A sponsorship is more like you pay per episode, something like that. A lot of these were more like affiliate deals. So I guess that could kind of be considered a sponsorship, but not really. Anyway, I digress. So like I said, working on the Blue Parrot thing, probably have that set up soon. And I'll be looking for other large corporations, hopefully that's got lots of money that would be willing to sponsor the show. Like for instance, when Pilot Flying and Jay, that was good because I could tell you about promotions they were running and things like that. I'd like to get Loves as an advertiser. They're great. I love that whole organization as we, every time we talk about Loves on the show, we have to say drink, but That's usually when they're putting up a new truck stop. Not so. As I mentioned in the intro, there is no news in this one. So there you go. So anyway, I mention all this to say that without advertisers, it's hard to keep this show going, and it's hard to motivate to do this show, if you know what I mean. I mean, I've talked about it before. I don't want to whine about it, but I'm going to because that's how I roll. When you do a podcast, it is kind of all consuming, especially when it's a weekly podcast. You know, I come in off the road. I look at all the news stories. Even when I'm sitting in the break room, a lot of time waiting on a load or something, I'm looking up news stories and reading them entirely, see if there's anything good or interesting. If I'm writing an article, like in today's episode, it takes a while to write that article. You have to think through the problem. I'm not just one of these writers who just whip something off the top of my head. I go through it, and I want to make sure by the time you're done reading or listening to the episode that you don't have more questions than what you had before. And that's what really happens in those informational articles, that sometimes, you know, when I read other trucking stuff, I have more questions when I'm done with it. And that just doesn't work for me. So now this one's just a story today. So it was a bit easier to write. But anyway, I digress again. So all that to say, no advertisers, when that means no money, but I still got bills to pay here. Now, some people like Fresh Waves, Victoria, Sierra, and Andrew have supported by buying the ebook combo pack. Some of them bought that for 25% off. Some of them got in on the deal later on for 50% off. So thank you to those folks. Another thing that was brought up by Stephen Gorman, who hosted the Christmas episode. Thank you, Stephen, by the way. Excellent job. He mentioned to me in a personal email that I should start a Patreon. I think I mentioned this a long time ago on the podcast, but it's been a long time. Anyway, Patreon is like a service where you can get people to support you or whatever you do. Like singers will do it. Podcasters will do it. Sometimes they'll put it out there and say, hey, support me on Patreon, and you can send them a monthly donation. Well, it's not a donation. It's basically you're paying for something, but that is the catch with Patreon. They want you to give something extra. So for instance, a lot of times, like a podcaster will say, hey, I'm issuing this podcast for free with the advertisements, but if you don't want the advertisements, you can pay like $5 a month on Patreon, or $3 a month, or $10 a month, or whatever their audience will support. And they will issue them an ad-free version or something like that. Or maybe they add in extra, like an extra segment at the end of the show where they're just talking to a buddy or something like that, kind of something off topic. But I don't have anything like that, nor do I have any time to do anything like that. So Patreon doesn't seem like a good opportunity for me. But you know what? I do have a PayPal donation button on the website. I'll put a link in the show notes also. And what I discovered recently, and I should have known this because it's happened in the past, is that when you go to this link, there's actually a checkbox that says donate monthly. So if you are the type who wants to contribute to the show and you don't want anything extra for it, well, feel free, by all means, have at it. However much you want to give per month, I'm not going to stop you, that's for sure. By the way, you can stop that at any moment. I have had people who gave for a while, and then when something came up in their life or they were dissatisfied with the show for whatever reason, they just quit donating. That's fine too. That's all at your discretion. But honestly, when you do that, you're not getting anything for your money except the satisfaction in knowing that your favorite podcast host can afford to keep the show going. But honestly, the best way to do this is to just use that Amazon affiliate link. Listen, I know either you or your wife or spouse or whoever is ordering a lot of crap on Amazon. We all know it. The numbers, you read news stories all the time where, Amazon's business is bigger than ever. I think this holiday was bigger than most, even with inflation and everything, but it just keeps going up more and more and more online ordering. You see how big Amazon's getting, right? I mean, warehouses everywhere. Well, again, you're spending that money already. So why not just use the Amazon affiliate link that I provide? You can go right over there. It'll take you to my book, But really, you don't have to buy the book. You just have to go anywhere else on Amazon and whatever shopping you do after that point up to like 24 hours or 48 hours. I don't remember what the time limit is on it. But anything you buy from Amazon at that point, I will get a cut of it. It does not come out of your pocket. It comes out of Amazon's pocket. It's just a small cut, and it helps keep the show going. So there you have it. 2 simple ways to support the show that don't take much effort at all. One is super easy. It just requires 1 extra click before you go to Amazon to order the stuff that you would normally be buying. And the other way is to just donate monthly or just donate a one-time donation. However much, $5, it doesn't matter. If you want to do it monthly, $1, that's fine. Every bit adds up. Now, this show will probably never be big enough because it's a trucking podcast. Probably not going to ever have the big enough numbers to support it completely without ads. So there will be ads back in the future, but every little bit helps, honestly. eBooks helps. You can do it that way too. And, keep the show going. Like I said a million times already. Okay. So we're almost like 20 minutes into the show and I'm still going on about money. So let's stop that and let's get back to what you really wanted. A lot of you were asking, saying that, you were okay with the news format, but you really love the old stories that I used to tell all the time. Well, that's what we got for you today. Thought of this, I was just going to mention this in like the opening of a podcast at some point. I like to tell a little story at the beginning of a podcast or, something that's happened. But in this case, I thought, I'll just hang on to it because quite frankly, the couple of last weeks of the month, I was glad I took off because there wasn't really a whole lot going on. And I was able to just kind of relax. Like I said, Stephen Gorman filled in for me at one point. That was nice of him. But honestly, there wasn't a whole lot of news. I'll be able to catch up on the news next week. But for now, we're just going to have a story and a couple of emails. How's that? So with that, let's get on with it. I call this one Scoot Over and Fix It Now. So this little story all started on the Tuesday after Thanksgiving 2022. I had just come back to work after an unexpectedly long holiday weekend. The holiday had started off great for a change of pace. You see, as a line haul driver for an LTL company, I typically run overnight. And that often means I get home on Thanksgiving Day with barely enough time to grab a nap before I proceed to eat too much turkey, which of course just begs you to pop that top button and take a nap. Unfortunately, that can be perceived as rude. So I generally wind up fighting through the tiredness just so that everyone can be blessed with my witty banter and charming personality. But this time was different. I got home early enough to get about 6 hours of sleep, which is enough for anyone claiming to be a trucker. Also, for once, I had a whole free day between our 2 Thanksgivings. My side of the family was happening on Thanksgiving Day, and the Evil Overlords was on Saturday. So like I said, we had a whole day to rest on Friday. Well, if you count cooking for the whole family as rest anyway. But I'm getting off track. The skinny of it is that I got home Thursday morning. So basically, I didn't have to work all day Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Now, I was honestly raring to go back to work on Monday, but I was told to stay at home due to a lack of freight. Bummer. I enjoy the time off, but I don't enjoy the next paycheck. But hey, at least if you're going to be forced to stay home and not get paid, at least it's on a day that'll make it a 5-day weekend, right? But therein lies the problem. You see, I typically only get about 40 hours off on the weekend. And lately when I came back to work on Monday nights, my truck was showing a low voltage warning. Now the truck always did start after a couple of cranks, but 5 days was more than she could handle. When I got to work Tuesday night, I turned the key and got absolutely nothing. I mean, nothing. No dash lights, no interior dome light, no dinging noises, no nothing. Our dispatcher had a city driver come out with the yard truck for a jump start, but the poor old gal was just having none of that. She was deader than a deer crossing I-95. Now, if you noticed, I just referred to my truck as a poor old gal, when in reality, she's a 2021 model. Despite that, we've had all sorts of issues with batteries since the very beginning. First, many of our trucks have needed all the batteries replaced within the first year. Now, that's not normal at all, but hey, it is what it is. And secondly, and the worst problem, there is a defect in the way they installed those batteries. What Peterbilt did was cheap out on battery cables. Not all of them, just one in particular. This one cable runs down to some sort of relay fuse box that mounts to the inside of the battery box. Sorry, but that's about the best description you're going to get from a non-mechanical dude like me. Basically, it's a known flaw that the cable is just too dang short, and with the truck jiggling down the road, it'll often break. More on that in a minute. It had already happened to 5 of our 8 Peterbilts at our terminal, and I felt fortunate to not be one of its victims yet. Well, seizing this opportunity, I wrote up the bad batteries and sent our mechanic a follow-up text asking him to replace that one short cable since he was already installing new batteries. That seems logical, right? Now, I know he's aware of this flaw because he's had to fix so many of them already, yet the only response I got was, I have new batteries on the way. Well, I should have known to follow up, but I gave the guy the benefit of the doubt. Dumb move. When will I ever learn to quit having faith in my fellow man? So I take a different truck out that week, and I get my truck back the following Monday night. She fires right up. Woohoo! With blind faith in my mechanic and my newly powered up Cheeky Baby, I hit the road with confidence. Everything went great for the first 2 days. On Wednesday night, I head out of St. Louis on my way to Columbus, Ohio. That's when it happened. I was about 45 miles west of Indianapolis when the truck engine suddenly died and every light on the truck shut off. No headlights, no taillights, no dash lights, no power steering, no nothing. Now, I would say deja vu of the previous Tuesday night jump-starting session, but only this time I'm cruising down the highway at full speed. I try to coast to an exit ramp, but no dice. I got as far off the highway as I could considering the wet ground. The last thing I needed was a rollover, you know. I call my breakdown department as I put out my hazard triangles. By the way, if memory serves, those go at 10 feet behind your truck, 100 feet behind your truck, and 200 feet behind your truck. Not 10, 20, and 30, you morons. Who's ever doing that? Stop it. That doesn't give anybody enough warning. But as you can see, that's not going to help much. So I got to tell you, there's nothing fun about sitting on the side of a busy highway like I-70 at 2:30 a.m. just over the crest of a hill. And this brings me to the first part of the title of this post. Scoot over. What in the name of Billy B. Heck is wrong with all these stupid truck drivers out here? I do understand that sometimes a driver just can't scoot over for a disabled vehicle if the left lane traffic won't cooperate in helping them switch lanes. And honestly, there's a really good chance it's going to happen a lot if you're in a metropolitan area. But there's absolutely no such excuse on a rural interstate at 2:30 a.m. Yet here I am, setting on my triangles and wiggling my flashlight at oncoming traffic to warn them of the hazard. And how many of them scoot over to the left lane? I'd say approximately 50%. Even when I'm opening my battery box, which of course is on the driver's side right next to the traffic, and continuing to shine my flashlight at oncoming vehicles, I've got trucks whizzing past my butt at full speed. Again, with nothing in the left lane, and no reason not to scoot over. Even sadder was that almost all the cars scooted over, but the truckers, who should know better, didn't. Now, I would like to think that anyone who cares enough about trucking to listen to the Trucker Dump podcast is also smart enough and courteous enough to not be one of these careless boneheads. But if you are one of these knuckleheads, let me ask you a question. Why? Why would you not want to change lanes if at all possible? Why would you risk hitting and almost certainly killing a human being? Even if no humans are present, why would you risk getting too close to a sideline vehicle and smashing your side mirror? Or worse, a full sideswipe like a trucker did to a co-driver of mine recently. This guy was sitting in the driver's seat on the shoulder with the service truck in front of him when a big rig came and swiped down his whole driver's side, ripping off the mirror, likely causing my coworker to crap himself a little bit. Thankfully, everyone was okay, but that's only because the service guy had seen the truck coming and dove into the ditch before it happened. Honestly, if he hadn't seen it coming, he likely would have never made it home to his family. He was standing in the gap between our driver's truck and his service truck. I don't know how he saw that other truck coming at him, but he did, thank God. Now, to add insult to injury on all this was a team operation who hit him, and neither driver claimed to be able to speak any English. Isn't that a requirement of having a CDL in the United States? But I digress. Do you know who I really feel sorry for in all this? The tow truck drivers and the mechanics who are called out to help all of us truckers. We truckers are always complaining about how much a road service costs, but take into consideration that this likely includes some kind of hazard pay to cover for idiot drivers who have no sense of safety or courtesy. And if that pay doesn't include hazard pay, it should. So thank you to all you heavy recovery specialists and mechanics out there. Heavy recovery specialists. See what I did there, Kevin? So to end this part of the story, scoot the heck over when you see a disabled vehicle on the side of the road. And if you're sitting on the shoulder of the road and you're not broke down, then you're an idiot too. I kind of hope that team of Mexicans comes by and takes the driver's side off your truck. It might teach you a lesson. Comprende? So anyway, back to my battery issues. A heavy recovery vehicle had been called out, but I managed to verify that this was the same problem that so many of our other Peterbilts had had. The battery cable had not in fact been replaced or lengthened in any way as I had requested. The terminal with the bolt hole at the end of the cable had simply snapped off. Now I tried to figure out a way to cram it down in there and get it to stay, but every time I started the truck, the slightest vibration of the engine cranking would lose the connection, and sparks would go flying. So now I knew what the problem was for sure. I called the tow company and explained the problem, stating I only needed a service truck, not a tow truck. The lady said she didn't have any technicians available and that the tow was my only option. Well, at least I can say I tried to save the company some money. Of course, when the tow truck got there and I showed him what the problem was, he asked, why the heck didn't they send out a service truck? After telling him what the lady had said, he got pretty dang grumpy, insisting there was a service mechanic on call that night. Obviously, this guy wasn't happy that the service guy was still in his bed while he was out there freezing his took-us off with the dark truck on the side of the highway with idiots flying by within feet where he works. Yeah, did I mention not one single truck ever slowed down either? Not one. But don't get me started again. By the time my truck and trailer gets dropped off at our Indianapolis yard, I've been down for 2.5 hours. Now, thanks to my union contract, I'm at least getting paid my full hourly wage for all this. So now I walk into our company shop and see one lonely truck sitting there. No hood open, no tools lying around, no mechanics to be seen anywhere. I go into the break room and find one mechanic eating lunch. I told him I'd just been towed in and all I needed was a battery cable. He said he didn't know how long it would take to fit me in. I turned and looked at the shop and turned back to him and said, really? It's just a battery cable. I really hate to lose my truck over something so simple. He said, well, I don't know if we have the part. To which I replied, it's a battery cable. Are you telling me a company this size doesn't have a battery cable in stock? He just shrugged it off. I continued, I really only need the terminal on the end of the battery cable. The cable's long enough if you reroute it a bit. Basically, that cable would have been long enough if you just routed it under one of the other cables. All this is so silly, I swear. So anyway, at this point, I could tell he was getting angry, and he said, listen, you're just going to have to take another truck, and we'll get to it when we can. I'm sorry, but I just couldn't help myself. I had to say it again. It's only a battery cable. At this point, I knew I was talking to a peanut butter sandwich eating brick wall who had the brains and heart of said peanut butter and bricks. I walked out pretty pissed. Granted, my version of pissed is not your standard pissed. My pissed is where I stay calm, I don't start calling people names, I don't get red in the face, and I never raise my voice. But my voice does have a tone of snottiness to it. I'm guessing the mechanic had picked up on this. Upon leaving Peanut Butter Face, I immediately run into another mechanic walking into the garage. I explained the problem to him, and guess what he said? He wasn't sure they were going to be able to get to me. Here we go again. Pretty much the exact same conversation took place, only this time he did agree to pull it into the shop simply because the tow truck needed someplace to drop it. 1 hour and 45 minutes later, I was finally back in my truck and rolling towards Columbus. Now, if you're like me, you're thinking, why the heck did it take 1 hour, 45 minutes to replace a battery cable? Well, to be fair, they also did have to hook up the driveline again after the tow. But still, I think even a guy with 10 thumbs like me could have done the job in half the time. The honest answer is, don't piss off the mechanics. never piss off the mechanics. Well, it's either that or they were completely incompetent. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they just didn't like me challenging them on their laziness. For the record, I also did text my home mechanic and told him what had happened because of his laziness, to which I got no response. No surprise there. One of our drivers has been waiting on windshield wipers for weeks. And before you say it, I know what you're thinking. Yes, I could have replaced that battery cable myself, and my coworker could have changed his windshield wipers himself, but technically we are not allowed because this is a union mechanic's job. So there's that. Besides, as I've said on here before, I refuse to spend my own money on a company truck. It's their truck, not mine. So now on to the second part of the title. Fix it now. Let's do some math. You can see where I'm going with this. I looked up shorter 1-gauge battery cables on Amazon, and it looks like I could get one for less than $30. That cost is considerably lower if you buy it in bulk, which my company should, considering how many trucks we have and how prevalent this problem is. Now, $30 is pretty cheap, but there are a couple other fixes that would only cost about 15 minutes of a mechanic's time. Now, the easiest fix is just to drill a new hole in the side of the battery box about 1 or 2 inches higher and relocate the relay fuse box, which effectively makes that shorter cable longer. I had a coworker do this on a weekend off when he wasn't supposed to, naughty boy. The other fix is unbolting one end of that short cable and rerouting it under another cable, like I mentioned earlier. That would give it plenty of length. Both are virtually free for the company. Now let's figure out what it actually cost my employer. The heavy recovery driver said towing the truck and trailer 45 miles would likely cost about $1,000, maybe a bit more. Then there's the cost of the company mechanic, which is probably about $50 for 2 hours, considering how cheap my company can be sometimes. But hang on, don't forget, I got paid for all that time too. 4.25 hours down cost them another $125, give or take. Now I know my math skills suck, but my calculator's pretty darn good at it. So that's $30 versus $1,175. Ouch. So, do I really have to say it? If you're listening to this and you're aware of anything wrong with your truck that could in any way cause it to break down or be put out of service, for the love of Pete, yes, that cheesy Peterbilt pun is intended, fix it now. So like any good 80s sitcom, I'll leave you with a couple of morals with the story. Scoot over and fix it now. Oh, and don't piss off your mechanics. P.S. The Indianapolis mechanics were not lying. They actually didn't have the correct part. He told me just before I left that they had to use 1.5 gauge cable instead of 1 gauge because that's all they had. I followed his advice by texting my mechanic that the cable need to be replaced with 1 gauge immediately so as not to cause any further issues. As of now, it's been 3 weeks that I've written up the 1 gauge cable and it still hasn't been fixed. I'll give you one guess how much faith in that actually happening before the truck burns to the ground. I've even started practicing by saying, I told you so, and I'm getting pretty good at it.
Hey, yo, bud, where do you want this load of feedback?
Feedback, oh feedback, wherefore art thou, feedback? That's as close as you're getting to Shakespeare on this podcast. Hey, speaking of that little feedback bumper there, Cece from the Trucker Dump Slack group was listening to one of the shows recently, and she texted in there, in the feedback section, is the guy saying, hey, yo, butt, where do you want this load of feedback? For the record, no. He is saying, hey, yo, bud, where do you want this load of feedback? Close, Cece, but no dice. Actually, the story behind that is I got a voice actor to do that. I just wanted somebody with like a Boston accent, and that was as close as the guy could get. But anyway, he is saying, yo, bud, where do you want this load of feedback? Anywho, in the last episode, well, not the last episode was Stephen Gorman's Christmas episode. In the previous episode before that, we talked about Driver Dave. He told a story. about some adventures he had while he briefly was trying to deliver groceries for one of those grocery delivery companies to like McDonald's and stuff like that. That was a funny one. Well, we said David had some more stuff, and he does. But before we get to that little story, let me just have one other that he talked about, which is kind of relevant right now. Driver Dave writes, "Sleep well, Todd. Don't stress about this. We do appreciate all your interview skills you bring to the table. Hey, maybe you should just schedule your breakdowns, eh? Then you can stay organized." Yeah, I would have plenty of time to do stuff, this podcast, if I was breaking down all the time. But let's not wish for that, okay? Anywho, Dave's other story. He writes, "Okay, so a bit more feedback, Todd. So I have an unpleasant bathroom experience to share also. Years ago, running for another carrier, we would often unload at Altoona, Pennsylvania, and whilst they found us a load home, we would go down to East Freedom, PA, to the truck stop and wait. So one afternoon, they told me to head over to Pittsburgh for a morning pickup. I stopped at a truck stop to grab a shower. I asked the fuel guy how much. He said, just go on in. So I thought, great. Well, I was a bit suspicious when I saw the mud all over the tile floor. Okay, well, it hadn't been clean in a bit. Then I got a nasty shock when I looked in and found there was no tap for the hot water, only cold. I considered this, thinking, okay, a free shower, and I've not had one in about 3 days. But I had a cold and the weather outside was nasty and freezing. So I turned on the water, jumped in for a second to get wet, then out to soap up and back in a few times for the rinse cycle and then done. Now, to be fair, this was probably 25 or 30 years ago, and I think the place is a lot nicer now. But there it is, my bathroom story. I'm always grateful for hot water now at the Flying J. Roger Beat, Driver Dave." That's both funny and awful, Dave. Ah, boy. You know, I remember being an over-the-road trucker, and even now, you know, as an LTL, but especially as an over-the-road trucker, when I was out driving all day long, really, the thing that really made my day was getting a hot shower at the end of it before I went to bed. It just really tops off your day nicely. And when you got cold water, it just makes it miserable. That still happens in the hotel here every once in a while, but for the most part, I get, you know, good water pressure, good hot water. And honestly, right towards the end of my over-the-road career, a lot of the truck stops didn't seem to have a lot of those hot water and water pressure problems that they did years ago, like when you're talking about here, Driver Dave. Now, here's the thing I am most grateful for. When you said you walked in and you saw mud all over the floor, my mind immediately went somewhere else. If you know what I mean. I was afraid that wasn't going to be mud. So at least thank God for that. At least I hope it wasn't mud. All right. Well, thank you, Dave, for that one. Thank you always for being a steady contributor to the show. I really appreciate it. And next up, we're going to hear from One of a Kind. At least that's her name in the Trucker Dump Slack group. And, well, she's going to tell you in her own voice.
I suggested that Todd ask for stories, and he called me out. I have to send in at least one. So
let me break in here for a second. Yes, One of a Kind. I did call her out on the Trucker Dump Slack group. She was one of the ones who wrote in saying she prefers the old style with more fluff pieces and more stories. And I said, isn't it interesting that all the people want more stories, but nobody ever wants to contribute? And she was even the one who had said truckers could write in and tell their stories. And I was like, yes, they could. Well, thankfully, she came through. Anyway, let's go on, One of a Kind. Thanks.
So he wants to hear the story about my epic breakdowns, and we will probably do that at some point. But right now, I'd like to cover one about harassment and urban parking. So there was a big segment in the last podcast before Christmas about this, and being a woman truck driver, I wanted to chime in on it. So there's a couple of things. Number one, I'm 55 years old. I'm not ugly by any means, but my days of sexy are gone. I don't have any issues, ever. Maybe it has to do with the fact that my first job I was a waitress in a truck stop when I was 14 years old. I learned to verbally protect myself. Yeah, those days, those were some fun days back then. But anyway, the story I'd like to tell. Let's start with harassment. First off, I drive the Western 11, so I really don't get into any of what I would consider the rough cities, quote unquote, that I've read about. But I have no fear. I'm probably too stupid to be scared.
Okay.
But wherever I park, I've never, ever felt any fear. The closest I've come to harassment, I'll never forget this. I had been driving about 3 weeks, and I had gone into a Love's to take a shower, and I have this long back washy thing that's like it's pink puffy on the end, and I got done with my shower, and I was buying some sodas, and I had it poking out because it was wet, and I didn't want to stick it all the way into my shower bag. So I'm standing in line, and there's this old guy behind me. Now, mind you, I'm 55, and I'm calling him old, so he was pretty old. And he'd probably been driving since I was like 12.
Yeah.
And I hear him say behind me, and he's your stereotypical truck driver, the cowboy hat, the boots, the big old belt buckle, the whole, if you think of a stereotype of a 1970s truck driver, this was the guy. And he says, honey, I could wash your back. And me with my smart ass, sharp tongue, turned around and said, dude, has that line ever worked for you? And he looked at me and he kind of smiled and he said, yeah, once in 1973. I cracked up laughing. So I've learned with that kind of stuff, with most people, if you can deal with it with a little bit of humor, maybe some sarcasm, usually it just goes away. That being said, anybody ever lays a hand on me, they'll come back with no fingers. I know how to protect myself. I think a lot of women walk around like they're expecting it. I walk around like you will treat me with respect because I am a woman and I deserve it.
Yeah.
I also don't get my panties in a wad over little things like what that guy did. That was more funny than anything else.
Yeah.
Don't take offense to everything these guys say because most of them don't mean it. And the ones that do, well, their mamas didn't raise them right. And I'll tell them that right to their face. Just girls, I don't know how many women listeners there are to this, but girls, walk with confidence, act with confidence, speak with confidence, and you'll have no problems. Or anyway, I never have. So the urban parking story, this is the best one. I had been driving maybe 3 months, and I end up in Stockton, California, picking up a load at like 9 o'clock at night. And I am definitely a solar-powered driver. Once it gets dark, I want to shut down. It's not my thing to drive at night.
Hey, have you met my friend driver Chris Mack? Perhaps I should introduce you to. All right, carry on, one of a kind.
So I get to my shipper, and they say the load isn't ready. Now, if you know Stockton, there's not a lot of truck stops. There's not a lot of parking.
Nope.
I, at this point, did not have the backing skills to even try to attempt to get into any parking there was at that time of night. So I'm freaking out. And the guy says, well, I'll let you drop your trailer and you can bobtail out. And I said, oh, okay. So that makes it easier. So I dropped my trailer and I bobtail out, and I realized that on this dead-end road that this shipper was on, there's an Amazon warehouse and people are just parked everywhere. And I thought, well, nobody's busting them. It's a good shot for me. So I go down to the end of this road and I turn around and I see that there's a motorhome, homeless people. Well, not homeless, they have a motorhome, I guess.
Yeah.
That's been there obviously a very long time, and then there's trucks parked, and I thought, okay, well, no one's going to bug me if I park here, even though there's big no parking signs. So I pull over, and I park now. I'm bobtail, so I don't take up much space, but I park between the truck and the motorhome. I've got a little distance, but not much. So I get in there. And I'm exhausted because, mind you, it's nighttime and I go to bed early and I haven't been driving that long and I'm just wiped. So I lock my doors and pull my curtains and I lay down and I fall sound asleep. and I wake up to police radio squawking, and the first thought in my head was, these bastards are going to make me move. I was very angry. So I get up and I put on my shoes and I go and I had the front curtains closed in the truck. I open up the curtains. There's like 5 cops taking cover in front of my truck, and they're just like waving me back into the back of my truck.
Holy crap.
And I was like, I wonder what's going on. And then I realized they were doing some sort of drug bust or something in that motorhome behind me. And of course my brain starts working real fast. And what I think is, I know these trucks are tough, but I don't think they're bulletproof.
No.
And I have no trailer behind me to protect me if there's a shootout. So what do? I take my pillow and my sleeping bag and I toss it onto the floor, and I lay down on the floor between the front seats and fall right back asleep. I have absolutely no idea what happened. I'm so tired I didn't care. Yeah. So I've learned a lesson. If someone looks like they're Breaking Bad back there out of a trailer or something, park far enough away that the cops don't use your truck for cover, because they'll wake you up with the radios. Anyway, y'all have a great day, and I'm sure I'll have more stories to tell later.
Oh, wow. Well, better being woke up by radio squawk than gunfire, right? Wow. What a story. And in your first 3 months of trucking, how do you like that? Never had anything strange like that happen. Holy mackerel. But hey, does anything ever really good happen in Stockton, California? I mean, it is in California, right? Well, thank you for that story, one of a kind. That was awesome. You know, when you were talking about how you were 55 and you weren't ugly by any means, but you weren't sexy by any means, especially not at your age, I couldn't help but bust up, because I cannot count how many times I've heard the evil overlord say this. And she's just 51 years old. So I'll make some comment about her being hot or something, and she'll say, yeah, maybe years ago, not now. And well, hey, she's my wife. I still think she's hot, but well, yeah, let's just all admit none of us near as good looking as we used to be, are we? How sad. And you are especially aware of growing old when you just help your 81-year-old mother-in-law with her physical therapy. At least it fell to the evil overlord to give her a shower. Although I did help her get in the shower, fully clothed, but when they kicked me out, I said, "Oh man, I miss all the good stuff." They both thought that was pretty funny. That's just the way our family rolls. Kind of weird. Yeah, I know, but my mother-in-law and I get along pretty great. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this show with just some feedback and a story. Nice change of pace to start off the new year, isn't it? Well, I would expect we're going to be right back to the news next week to catch up. We are starting to get behind, and there's starting to get some news coming out again after the new year has started and everything's going again. Thanks to Driver Dave and One of a Kind for writing in. Well, Dave wrote in. One of a Kind sent that awesome audio comment. I love audio comments, as you know. You can send those to truckerdump@gmail.com if you have your own story to tell. And we do have another one from One of a Kind later on. Plus, she did promise us about her breakdown session, which sounded horrible. It was one after the other, and so many of them, I just had to hear this story. So we'll get that out of her one day too. Also, another thing you can do is submit your favorite place to eat as a trucker. Now, the caveat is you have to be able to get there in a truck or within a short walk from truck parking. I call that segment the Trucker Grub. To do that, it is audio comment only. Just whip out your voice memo app like One of a Kind did there. Record into it about 3 minutes. Turn your truck off, please, so I can get good audio. You know how I am about audio quality. So anyway, just tell me about the restaurant. Tell me the name of it, where it's at, what the prices are, what your favorite meal is, what the atmosphere is like, if they've got any cute waitresses, all that good stuff, right? Send it off to truckerdump@gmail.com. And I mentioned cute waitresses, but don't be a perv about it. All right. Well, with that, this is going to close out the first episode of 2023. Hopefully there will be many, many more. And hopefully this year we will be picking up some new sponsors that will be more targeted at you, that you will have some interest in, and hopefully it will be a successful relationship for all parties involved. You will get something good out of it. I will get some money for it, and they will get some new customers. That's the whole idea of this thing. But for now, let's say we just strap on that guitar, turn up the amp, and get on out of here. Well, I started off the show with lots of begging, so it seems only appropriate that I would bookend this episode with a little bit more begging. First, you can donate any amount once or choose to give monthly through my PayPal donation link. Or if you want to get something more for your money, please consider using my Amazon affiliate link. Again, this won't cost you anything more than you are already going to spend on crap you probably don't need. And thirdly, you can support the show by buying the ebook combo pack for 50% off, only $9.99 for 2 books. You'll find links to all these in the show notes or at abouttruckdriving.com. Just search for TD185. Well, as always, thanks for listening and following the show. So until next time, drive safe, stay out of my way. In today's show, we go back to a time where there was nothing on the show but this dorky trucker telling a story and reading a couple of emails. Emails. And that often means I get home on Thanksgiving Day with barely enough time to grab a nap before I proceed to eat too much turkey. And secondly, and honestly the worst problem, there is a defect. Which is it? And hopefully this year we will be.